Great, thank you so much, Dr. Mittal. Now we will have Dr. Padmaja speak on gender time use patterns and effects on nutritional status of women.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Padmaja from ICRISAT, and I'm going to present this work. Just a question, can you see this? Actually, I thought the colors look very different, but anyway. So this is the work that we have been doing as part of VDSA, and this is the work in progress that we are still continuing looking at the data, analyzing the data, and also validating it with the ground realities. So we've heard so much about nutrition and gender and women, and then there has to be like different perspectives give, and different disciplines and different approaches tell you different things about the same issue. And here is an example where we are trying to use some sociological analysis to understand what happens to women who are in agriculture and what is the impact of their working in agriculture, doing multiple tasks on the nutritional status of themselves, but we're also going to look at children in future. So this is an overall framework linking agriculture, nutrition, health, and environment. And as you can see from this figure, there are three pathways that lead to the ultimate outcomes, that is better child nutritional outcomes and mother's nutritional outcomes. So the first one is the production pathway, where you are able to improve the yields through production diversity, through improving the diversity in the production, through better prices and also through the availability of foods, and thereby because they have more yields, they have more food, so there is better nutrition. The second pathway is the agricultural income pathway. Now, so that's the advantage. I look at it as an opportunity. And the third pathway is the women's empowerment pathway, where like if women are having the ability to make decisions, because they have more knowledge, because their capacities have improved, then they will be able to participate not only in agriculture, but also looking at the caregiving aspect, looking at how they can spend their time so that there is better outcomes in terms of their own nutrition as well as children. And then the last is looking at the diversity, that is what food people eat, so whether the diets are diverse, so you improve the quality of the diets, and not just the quality, but also enough quantity so that it is reflected in terms of their nutrition, and using anthropometry and other biomarkers. So that's just a framework. But let me just ask you a question. Like it's very difficult to understand what we do in a day. So let's try to understand what rural women and men do in a day. And we collected this information using a 24-hour recall on time use. To look at the question looks very simple. What do I do in a day? Very easy. Oh, I did this, and that. But then when you start understanding the patterns, it is very complex. And that's what this whole issue is. So there's not much research, there's not enough evidence that tells us how time use can impact agriculture or nutrition and vice versa. And so here is we have small studies, small findings, small evidences that will help us to think about how we can research further into this issue, what are the nuances that we need to understand, and how these interpretations can help us in doing better statistical analysis or developing better models that can actually help us in robust analysis. So let's look at the case of men. What do men do in a day of 24 hours? And you can see the orange part of the pie is looking at the productive work, that is the farm and the non-farm work, and you can see they spend about 37% of their time on that. The gray part of the pie is the time they spend on recreation, on sleeping, on leisure, which looks like a big part of the pie. The yellow part is the other activities that they do. And what are these other activities? Is going to the market, or just going and talking, or sometimes it is bringing in some food or taking their children to school or bringing them back. So these are all the other activities. And the smallest part of the pie, that is the blue, is their contribution to the domestic activities or the household chores, including food preparation, fetching water for the family, and other chores. Now let's look at what women do in a day of 24 hours. You see, they are also involved in farm and non-farm work, 34% compared to 37% by men. The gray part of the pie, I'll come back to it in a minute. Look at the yellow part, which is the other activity. So you see that women are not just doing agriculture, but nowadays they are also traveling, they are also commuting, they are going to the market. So that means that they are playing multiple roles. And the blue part of the pie is their role in domestic work. And that means preparation of food for the family, fetching water, which is a very big and important task for the health and nutrition of the household. Because if we do not have quality water, then even if there's good nutrition, then the availability of the nutrients into the body or the absorption of the nutrients by the body will not happen. And then I come to the last part of the pie, that is the gray pie, and that's also leisure, rest, sleep, etc. But here is the difference between men and women. When we asked and we validated it, like we did some cognitive testing to understand what is the concept of leisure. For men, it's watching television, going to the center of the village and chit-chatting with other fellow villagers. Talking politics is big in the village, right? So that's the concept of leisure, apart from sleeping and resting. But for women, when we said, what is leisure to you? They said, of course, some did say that it's watching television and then doing other things like talking to their neighbors and gossiping. But the interesting things that came out during these conversations was that separating seeds for the next generation, because every year we cannot be buying quality seeds. So when we have our harvest, so the first thing that we do is to sort out the seeds, the good seeds, and save them for the future. That, they said, is a kind of a leisure because we women get together and ensure that there is seed available for the next season or the next time that crop is grown. That's one. Second one they said was, nowadays with more emphasis and awareness about education, talking about the education of the children with other women in the community is also a kind of leisure. What is happening in your child's school? Because now they are not sending their children to, at least this is in the Semi-Arid Tropics. I'm sorry I forgot to mention, this is in the villages of Telangana and Maharashtra. 4 villages in Maharashtra, like 2 in Akola and 2 in Solapur, and 2 villages in the drought-prone regions of Mehbubnagar. And all these 3 locations are heavily dependent on agriculture for their income. So they said, now the concept is to send their children to private or English medium schools because there's a school bus that comes in. There is a uniform that the child wears, so it gives them a status symbol. And then also trying to see what other children are bringing or taking for their lunch or breakfast. Earlier, they would be giving them sorghum chapatis or leftover rice that is marinated. It's soaked in water, fermented in water, which is very good because all the B vitamins are saved. But now they see what the other women are preparing for their children and the concept of Maggi noodles. That is it's a status symbol. So, okay, if she is preparing Maggi noodles for her child, then why should I not do that? So these are the kinds of things for them is leisure, where they learn about nutrition, where they learn about education, where they learn about what crops to grow, how to save and sort the seeds, and come together collectively and work on this. So that's the concept of leisure. Though it says that they are spending almost the same amount of time as men with respect to resting and sleeping, but then when you see, that's the difference. Okay. Okay, we can have the question and answer session because I did that. I can come back to you later. And look at the education and income effects. You can see that when you look at income, what is happening is when you compare the high income versus the low income and the middle income versus the low income, what you see is that the high and the low income, what is actually called as leisure, that is resting and sleeping, you see they are spending less number of hours compared to the low income in this case. And then education, you see that now that you don't see much of a difference in terms of like the educated women don't prepare food. No, it's not that. Even if you're better educated, you still prepare the food for the family and you take care in that aspect of the household. So what does this lead to? You can see that women are working on the farm, both non-farm and farm, and we can also see a progressive feminization of agriculture in these villages. Of course, here it's very important that, this is very context specific maybe, but then it's very important to understand that in the semi-arid tropics, you could see the importance or the increasing role of women in agriculture. This is in the 6 villages, and this looks at the ratio of the women's time over men's time in the field. And let me take an example of the red bars that you can see. That's belonging to a village Tokur, and that's the ratio of the time men and women spend in agriculture. Now, when Dokur was prospering because they had water in the tank, they were growing paddy, you could see that the time involvement of women was more than men. But once there was droughts, continuous droughts, and you see that the cropping patterns have changed, and they have actually withdrawn a lot from agriculture, you see the role of women also declining. Now let's look at another bar, the first light blue bar, that is the village Aurepalli, which was totally dependent on rainfall in the beginning in the 70s. But then when cotton came into the village, in their cropping patterns since 2005, you can see the role of women in agriculture has increased, and it's going on and on. And you can see it's almost like 3.5 times more time than men they spend in the agriculture in the field. And this varies by crop, so that's what I want to say. Cropping pattern plays a very important role on the involvement of women in agriculture. But what is the point I want to show here is that there are 3 operations which are basically performed by women almost. That's weeding, harvesting, and sowing or transplanting. And look at the time that the women spend. The yellow and the green bars actually tell you the time of women on these 3. Only I just took those 3 major operations. And the operations that are performed by men include summer harvesting, irrigation, and land preparation. Now, what you can see from this is that the operations that women perform are still not mechanized. They still have to do it on the field and work full time in the field for that, whereas the activities like harvesting or irrigation or land preparation, there is mechanization. So the message that I want to convey here is that there is mechanization in agriculture, but then the activities that are being performed by women are yet not mechanized. So it does not free the women away, or the time is not freed, but they still have to participate in agriculture. And who is substituted? Family female is substituted for hired male because of the difference in the wage rates. As you can see, women's wages still continue to be low, even though there's been great improvements. There is still a 62 rupees, at least in the semi-arid tropics, a 62 rupees difference of wage rates between men and women. And women are substituted because men are migrating to urban towns for other forms of employment. So this shows that, women are playing a greater role in agriculture. And then when you look at their nutritional status, like as Prabhu said in the morning, especially in the case of women, though we have made improvements in reducing undernutrition in women, the biggest worry is the red line, which shows that on an average, the growth rate, we are increasing obesity among women at the rate of 11% per annum, whereas we are only able to reduce undernutrition by 6% overall. So double. So that shows the gravity of the situation. That's not so much so in the case of men. And the same thing with children. Look at the stunting indicators. And what is surprising to note, and we found that this results also match with the NHFS findings, is that in this particular villages, boys are more stunted compared to girls here. So that's what calls for some more attention to understand why boys now are more malnourished. And when we spoke to the women, we conducted focus group discussions, there were two possible explanations. One was that there's a preference for sons, and they want the sons to be healthy. So this was not among the educated women, but with other women. And they said they start weaning the boys at a much early age. So they breastfeed the boys, but also give them weaning food. And that's a source of infection, because sometimes if the water or the food is not prepared properly, that's a source of infection. Whereas girls are solely breastfed for a year, and it's only after that they are introduced to the weaning foods. A second hypothesis, which I am not able to confirm, but that's what the literature says, is that boys tend to be more vulnerable in terms of falling sick in the early parts of their childhood, whereas girls are, they said that, because genetically they tend to be more strong during the early childhood. So that could be the reason, but we have to examine it further. We did some statistical analysis also, but these are not the final analysis. But what these show is that leisure plays a very important role in terms of time use among women. And then we find that income, there is not much difference, but education does play a difference in the way women allocate their time between farm, household, and other activities. And we did find there is an impact on the time spent by women on the nutrition. And so just to conclude, what I would like to say is that understanding time issues and linking it with the nutrition is a complex issue. And it does matter both for men and women, but more so for women. And whatever the time commitments, whether they're increased or decreased, they have an impact on the nutrition status of themselves and their family. And this we need to understand further. And one way of making sure that women have time to participate more in the care economy and take care of their children, and in terms of food preparation, is to empower the women. By empowering, I mean you give them not just access to resources, but control over resources. Because we have seen, the earlier speakers have also said, they do not have, the extension workers do not come and inform them anything. They have no control over the resources. But not just access, but if we can give them control, then they'll be able to make better decisions. And these decisions will help in improving the nutrition of their own self as well as their children. And lastly, the point that I want to make is we do not have enough data or information on this. And so I think as a group of researchers, economists, sociologists, biochemists, all of us should get together and try to generate the evidence which will help us in actually understanding why India continues to have malnutrition in spite of making great progress. And looking at it from a time use lens is another way of understanding this whole situation. Thank you.